Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. I'm so glad you're here because today we're diving into a seriously fascinating look at personal boundaries. We're going to be walking through a biblical framework presented by the channel Faith Unmasked. The big idea here, well, it's that not every open hand is actually a blessing, and not every gift is, innocent. We're going to break down their approach on how to set hard boundaries and really filter what we let into our lives. We'll look at how certain gifts, whether that's an object, an opportunity, or even just a favor, can actually carry some pretty heavy hidden burdens. It's a super structured, no-nonsense way to protect your space, and I absolutely cannot wait to unpack the whole shebang with you. Let's get into it. So this entire framework is built on one really powerful directive. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, "Test all things, hold fast what is good." And Faith Unmasked uses this exact verse to introduce what they call a spiritual filter. Now, what's crucial to grasp here is that they aren't telling you to live in this constant state of paranoia, right? You don't need to be suspicious of every single person you meet. Instead, the text is arguing for sharp discernment. The core argument is that what you allow into your home, into your hands, and into your general environment, it actively shapes your life. So you've got to evaluate or, test what comes your way before you just give it a permanent spot in your world. Okay, let's dive into this outline. Today, we'll explore the spiritual filter, rejecting dark spiritual ties, guarding peace and healing, protecting integrity over gain, and finally, the virtue of rejection. Section 1, Rejecting Dark Spiritual Ties, Occult Objects and Inheritances. To really paint a picture of this, the source points to a wild historical case study from Acts 19. Check this out. When the people of Ephesus turned to Christ, they didn't just, pack their old magic books away in some dusty attic trunk. Nope, they gathered them all up and publicly burned them. The source makes a huge point here. They didn't try to justify keeping these things for cultural memory or because they were worth a lot of money. The biblical argument they're presenting is simply that light and darkness, they have zero fellowship. From this perspective, objects intentionally used in occult practices aren't just harmless, neutral decor. They act as literal symbols of spiritual allegiance. So if you want to protect the spiritual atmosphere of your home, you have to actively remove them. Which brings us to a really practical, though, sometimes a bit sensitive application. There is a massive difference between a harmless family memory, like say your grandpa's squeaky old rocking chair, and inherited spiritual confusion. The text totally acknowledges that passing down heirlooms like jewelry or furniture is a beautiful thing, but, and this is a big but, it argues that if an object was specifically used by your ancestors in rituals or ungodly practices, you are under absolutely zero obligation to keep it. You don't owe it to sentimentalism. Actually, scratch that. It's more about establishing your own clear space. According to this framework, true maturity might literally mean grabbing a heavy-duty trash bag, tossing those dark inheritances right in, and throwing them out to establish a fresh, clear identity in your home. Section 2. Guarding Peace and Healing Internal Boundaries. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the linguistic breakdown. The source brings up Colossians 3:15, which says, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts." But when you actually look at the original language, the word rule literally translates to acting as an umpire or a referee. Just think about that for a second. It's like your internal peace is blowing a whistle signaling when a decision is stepping out of bounds. The text points out that sometimes someone offers you a gift or an opportunity that looks totally fine on paper. It's logical, it's generous, but deep down, your spirit feels this heavy, unexplainable discomfort. This framework teaches that you absolutely shouldn't silence that inner umpire just because you're feeling social pressure. If you don't have peace about it, that's your signal to stop. Period. And that internal protection, it extends right into the physical items we surround ourselves with every day. Think about the difference between a normal, happy keepsake and what the source calls an anchor to past pain. We aren't talking about demonic objects here. We're talking about emotionally destructive ones. Picture a shoebox stuffed with toxic letters from a relationship that totally ruined your self-esteem, or maybe a piece of jewelry given to you by a master manipulator. The source leans on Philippians 3:13, which actually commands believers to forget what is behind and reach forward. I mean, how can you possibly reach for your future if your living room is just littered with emotional anchors dragging you right back into past trauma? You can't. Just listen to this striking analogy from the source text. God wants you free, not living in a museum of your failures and wounds. Wow, they're making a really profound connection here. That deep mental and emotional healing often goes hand in hand with a literal physical cleansing of your environment. If looking at an object makes your stomach drop with anxiety or throws you back into a season of shame, there's no way it deserves a spot in your house. You are absolutely not meant to be the curator of your own painful history. So, this brings us to a major pivot point in our explainer today. I want to pose this heavy question directly to you right now. Would you trade your long-term integrity for a little bit of temporary gain? It's a tough one, right? But it transitions us perfectly from emotional healing straight into our final and honestly most fiercely practical category yet: ethical traps. Section 3, protecting integrity over gain, ethical and material boundaries. To really grasp the gravity of ill-gotten gains, the source pulls up the story of Achan from Joshua chapter 7. It's a wild story. Achan saw this forbidden Babylonian gold, completely coveted it, and hid it under the floor of his tent. And the result? He literally brought defeat to his entire nation. The argument they're drawing from this is incredibly stark. If you know for a fact that a gift, a fancy luxury item, or a pile of cash was obtained through fraud, exploitation, or corruption, you just cannot take it. Even if your hands are technically clean and you didn't commit the fraud yourself, knowingly benefiting from it, that makes you a spiritual accomplice. It really boils down to the ultimate daily ethical dilemma: the shiny allure of a temporary benefit versus the absolute bedrock of long-term integrity. The text brings in Proverbs 15:27, driving home the point that greedy bribes ultimately just bring ruin. The source argues, pretty passionately actually, that God is not impressed by luxury that's financed by sin. They suggest it is 1,000 times better to live a super modest life where your head hits the pillow with a perfectly clear conscience, rather than, surrounding yourself with all this abundance that's quietly tied to corruption. In this framework, a clear conscience is infinitely more valuable than any compromised luxury. And we see the ultimate absolute masterclass in this kind of integrity right here in the Matthew 4 case study. Out in the wilderness, Jesus was offered all the kingdoms of the world. Just imagine that, a spectacular, breathtaking offer. But of course, it came with a massive, glaring, hidden condition. He had to bow down and worship to the enemy. Jesus completely rejected the condition right then and there. The source uses this to show us that some gifts aren't actually gifts at all. They're hooks. They are bribes wearing the mask of generosity. If a promotion at work, a new financial opportunity, or even a favor from a friend demands that you lower your moral standards, tell a lie, or just stay quiet when you see injustice, well, that's a hook demanding a piece of your soul in return. Section 4, the virtue of rejection. A summary. Proverbs 10:22 states that the blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. The overarching narrative we're getting from the source here is that genuine, true gifts from God do not come with dark strings attached. They don't act like emotional anchors weighing you down, and they definitely do not require you to compromise your deepest convictions. The text asserts that knowing how to politely, or maybe not so politely, reject these things isn't about lacking gratitude. It's not a lack of humility. It's actually a really vital virtue of protection. Accepting literally everything that gets handed to you, that's just a sign of careless boundaries. So the crucial point is, let's make sure we cement this list right in our memories. The 6 gifts this framework says you absolutely must reject are: 1. Occult objects that tie you to darkness. 2. Favors that inexplicably steal your inner peace. 3. Dark generational inheritances. 4. Corrupt rewards funded by sin. 5. Those heavy emotional anchors that trap you in past pain. And 6, bribes that compromise your integrity. The source makes a really compelling case that by keeping these 6 specific things out, your environment is going to be purer and your mind is going to be so much freer. And just like that, we've reached the end of our journey through this framework. But before you go, I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought. Look around. Is there an innocent gift in your life right now that's quietly anchoring you to the past, or maybe even compromising your future? Seriously, take a good look around your own environment this week. Try applying this filter and see what happens. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.